Good morning, everyone. My name is Gloria Patterson. I'm an instructor at Consolidated Edison, Company of New York Incorporated, and I am happy to welcome you to our panel discussion on navigating the new normal, how utilities adapted to a pandemic in the midst of social unrest. I could not start this session without first acknowledging a few people and giving thanks. I want to say a special thank you to Mr. Bill Suggs, Jerry Dawes, Gina Callender, Catherine Lewis, Dion McGee, Janet Velasquez, and the entire AABE-NYMAC family for affording me the opportunity to moderate this panel and for all the work behind the scenes. I would also like to thank our panelists for taking time out of their busy schedules to be a part of this discussion. And lastly, I would like to thank everyone who signed up for our session. So for this discussion, we're going to start off with introductions, followed by a panel discussion. Then we will have a Q&A segment, and I will conclude with closing remarks. Without further delay, I would like to introduce you to our panel members who will take us through this discussion. First up is Ms. Melanie Littlejohn. Melanie Littlejohn is the Vice President of Customer and Community Management at National Grid. She is responsible for leading the external affairs, customer, and stakeholder engagement for the company's New York jurisdiction. She is focused on the delivery of energy to the region's 4 million customers located in over 800 communities. She obtained a Bachelor of Arts degree in Liberal Arts from the State University at Stony Brook and a master's degree in Business Administration from Syracuse University's Whitman School of Management. Melanie is an active member of various chambers of commerce, boards, and community organizations, where she gives presentations on emerging industry trends and energy policy to bring energy to life for our customers. Our next panelist is Mr. Milo Blair. Milo Blair is the Senior Vice President of Central Operations at Consolidated Edison, Company of New York Incorporated. He is responsible for the planning, design, operations, and maintenance of the company's electric transmission, substations, primary control center, steam generating plants, steam distribution system, engineering, and construction activities. Milo joined Competence in 1991 as a management intern and has held positions of increasing authority before assuming his current role. Milo completed the Siemens Power Technology course in Electric Power Systems Engineering, as well as the Columbia University Senior Executive Program. He has a Master's of Business Administration from St. John's University and a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering from the City University of New York. He has received the Harlem YMCA Black Achievers in Industry Award in 2004. Milo dedicates his personal time to mentoring young people, leading education, and investing in the community. He serves on several corporate and community boards. Our last panelist is Mr. Herbert Pruitt. Herbert currently supports Verizon as a director of fleet operations. He has successfully led teams throughout his 36-year career for state government, the federal government, and the private sector. Herbert earned a Master's of Management degree from Cambridge College. He is also an editorial advisor for the Utility Fleet Professional Magazine, also known as UFP. He serves on the Legislative Committee for the Fleet Management Association. Herbert is passionate about safety, emergency preparedness, serving people, and supporting organizations that deliver societal benefits through their products and services. Through his tenure with various organizations, he was privileged to support responses to 9/11, the H1N1 pandemic, the Haitian earthquake, Hurricane Sandy, and the California wildfires. His logistical experiences prepared him to lead his team through the challenges of 2020 and help them to adjust to new norms. So we pulled together some of the region's best to speak on this very important and timely topic. And you, the audience, will also have an opportunity later on to ask them questions during our Q&A segment. This has been a very challenging year for us as we are living in unprecedented times. When Americans live in challenging times, people tend to put their biases aside and come together for the greater good. There was 9/11, Hurricane Sandy, and the blackout of 2003. And now in 2020, the utility sector is facing a global pandemic, working through social unrest while providing essential services to millions. To say we are facing a complex problem would be an understatement. The solution lies not only within the minds of the people, but in the actions we take toward the change. Now let's get into our discussion. The COVID-19 crisis is hurting all communities, but not equally. Communities of color are once again at the front line of vulnerability. A study led by Yale researchers found that Black Americans are 3.5 times more likely to die from COVID-19 than any other group of people. While Black Americans make up just 13.4% of the populations in the United States, they have accounted for about a quarter of all deaths. Our community has struggled with this harsh reality, forcing discussions around systemic issues that play into those statistics. In addition to the COVID reality, our community and the businesses where we work were thrusted into a current climate of social unrest and thousands of people protesting against systemic racism and in support of the Black Lives Matter movement, bringing these inequities into an even sharper focus, adding more political and emotional weight to longstanding issues. Our industry has not been exempt from the harsh realities. Today, we will be reviewing the impact these two issues had on our business and how we responded to them. We will also look into how we move forward and operate in this new normal. Melanie, I'd like to get started with you. How has COVID-19 changed the business for National Grid?
Thanks, Gloria. When I think about one sitting here with Milo and Herb, I think probably we could all attest to what we've learned going through this process is our level of our ability to change and be flexible and to drive change very quickly. When I think operationally, how we were able to shift resources to a large segment of our workforce working from home, working remotely, things that may have taken, loads of time and studies and the level of coordination and resiliency and flexibility that we've demonstrated as a business has been absolutely tremendous. And it's obviously what we are doing to rise to the needs of our customers and communities during this time. It's really about innovation, empathy, as well as flexibility. So it's changed us as a business.
Herbert, how about you?
I think we've all experiencing some similar things as we, working from home. And I think one of the biggest changes, and it's something I'm proud of, and it's, the speed at which we've changed. It's quite amazing how flexible, how adaptive everyone has been. Things that we would, a year ago or a month ago, we'd be like, no, impossible, can't be done. Okay, if we're forced to do it, it would take 5 years. Once we decided we were going to go virtual and have folks work from home, 110,000 people in a week started working from home. So people, how did this happen? Technology, security, we say, hey, Do we have enough laptops? We ordered and we purchased, pressed our IT team, and we made a decision and says, hey, some of our teams still have desktops. Why can't, it seems simple, right? Why can't you take your desktop home? Prior to that, that would have been enough, but everybody took their equipment home. So I think that was amazing, the speed at which we did that. And there's some of our employees, just like some of in this sector, that can't work from home. So how do you protect those folks? And our focus has been employee and public safety from the very beginning. But now we have people, a portion of our folks out there serving a customer. We still have to take care of the customer. So we got really creative. We did touchless installs. So how do you install hardware without someone entering the home? So we had some novel ideas called like files in the box. A technician would show up at your house, drop the equipment at your doorstep. We quickly deployed a self-service app, and the customer happily installed their devices and their hardware while the technician sat outside if they needed to call for any technical support. So the speed of change has been amazing. And speaking of keeping our folks safe, the protocols, the purchasing, and just the acquisition, the supply chain, where everybody's trying to get products from face coverings to disinfectant. We purchased that in advance as we were getting, at the early in the year, because we thought this was going to be serious. We deployed all of those things, thermometers, protective equipment. We sent things to people's homes, and we set up a protocol for when folks are going to come to work, have to face customers, that they have a temperature check. There's a certification process, and our team has just been outstanding. So for Verizon, it's just been the response of our team and how quickly we've changed.
Thank you. You touched on a lot of the changes that have been made to our normal day operations within Verizon. I know there are a lot of teams popping up to help companies stay ahead of COVID. Milo, at Con Edison, how has the pandemic team been assisting with the response to COVID-19?
Thanks for the technical to that back. So I would say that the pandemic team was at the center of our response. We have always had a pandemic plan. I remember back with H1N1, they really worked behind the scenes and worked with the operating group on our response. But this was on a different scale. And they certainly, I think they expanded the team cross-functionally. We had the subject matter experts that interfaced with the CDC, interfaced with the state, the regulators. And so that took the stress to some extent off the operational groups and help us to focus on some of the issues that both Herb and Melanie talk about in terms of getting work done. How do you approach a customer? How do you, for instance, go man and social distance, man, and you maintain that distance? So it helped us to really focus on that. The pandemic team, kept both senior management enterprise as well as the whole management team, and I think from where I start, they really did a phenomenal job in not only executing the plan, because we have always had a plan. And as Melanie said, if someone said to us prior to March, can we pivot and operate from home? For example, my engineering group has been operating from home since the pandemic and been doing that effectively. If you had asked me, I would say no. But certainly, I think the structure that we put in place with the pandemic team being the point, and they interfacing with the outside agency and the CDC, and we having the matter and the breaking for us in people, right? Because we tend to be specific, and we want to know the plus and minuses, and I think they did a phenomenal job doing that.
All right, thank you. So
I would also add, there's certain other things that we did, and I think as an industry, we didn't do it at all. We talked about the pandemic team, but certainly we didn't do it at all. I think as an industry, whether an industry organization, whether it's AGA or EEI, got all the utility companies together. We benchmarked across each other. For instance, if NatGrid was doing something that made sense to us, and we certainly, we were on those calls, we were able to take the best practices and assimilate it and make it our own. The other thing I would also think, and I didn't discuss with the leadership, because they, as we try to navigate across navigate the new norm, so to speak, issues did come up and we were able to work it through. We had midnight calls if that's what it took, and to make it happen. And then with the pandemic team, as I said, in the key structure that helped us through it, we were communicating up and down the chain of command, so folks were well informed.
Okay, thank you. One question that comes to mind. We saw a shift in employees working in the offices throughout all the 5 boroughs of New York and New Jersey, and I'm just wondering, what were the impacts of that from a system standpoint? We have a lot of residential load that the system is seeing. Was there any issue with that as far as COVID goes?
I can start. I would say one of the things, that didn't change for us was our 3 priorities that drive everything that we do at ConEd. So it's safety of our personnel and the customer, operational excellence in everything we do, and the customer experience, making the customer priorities our own, right? So that didn't change. What did change was how we did work. And certainly for the safety of the employee was paramount. And whether it was Matilda's law, whether it was a quarantine time frame that folks, if you had to quarantine, we abided by that, but our core principle was serve our customers. So we had to work some overtime, whether we sort of prioritize work that we thought we didn't have to do, we didn't do, work that we thought were priority, and to serve the customer, we made sure that we did. So in terms of service to the customer, that was always paramount for us, and the customer didn't see a shift in service, even though we had, we were going through the same thing other utilities were going through, where folks were working from home, where you had to quarantine folks. Just like NatGrid, we had to sequester our control center. So all those were operating behind the scenes, but the customer never saw that in terms of service, because our core was to make sure we serve the customer.
And to add to Milo's comments, when we keep the customer at the center of all of our work, and our processes and how we've adapted was really driven by the customer. And I think Milo touched on this as well. One of the most profound things that I saw that we did as a business, well, there were several, but 2 that really jumped to mind, is the fact that we sequestered our control centers across the whole of New York State. And so that's asking men and women to pack up and leave their families for 6 weeks. 6 weeks. Come live where you work. Live where you work for 6 weeks, so that we could ensure 2 things. One, that the system remained operational, and that we kept customers in the front part of that decision, just to ensure that, understanding that men and women are now working from, moving from an office building to now working from home. So seamless and effective power, 24 hours a day is always important, but has even a higher level of importance now. And so the measures that we've all gone through to ensure that is something that I think we should absolutely be proud and focused focus on as an industry. And then the last thing is, what we're even doing for customers that are trying to navigate the world of being unemployed and have never understood the, what feeling unemployed means, and really helping them even step through, all of the fear and concerns they had around utilities and bills and being able to make ends meet. So I think this is what we've done as an industry, what we've done as a company to really kind of meet customers when they are the most vulnerable in this moment of the pandemic.
Thank you. So in addition to COVID-19, we also had some very trying times this year. George Floyd was murdered in broad daylight in the streets of Minneapolis, and the world responded. How did your company respond to the world's reaction and subsequent outcry following George Floyd's killing? Herbert, we'll start with you.
Certainly that, George Floyd's killing, the video, brought out a lot of emotions. And, I've worked at other companies where there were different folks who were killed at different times. And there wasn't this video that documented every second of it. And at Verizon, I was, wondering how our company was going to react. I know how I felt, the people that I talked with felt about it, but we said, will there be a message? And one of the things that quickly came out at our June leadership forum, the executives, our CEO, gave an emotional opening to all employees of the company about how it impacted him, how he feels about it, and that he really is going to, work to create a culture that we could talk about these things openly. And it's not, and he was very careful to say, this is not just a moment. He adopted that this is a movement as well, and put procedures, processes, and teams together to make sure that actually happens. Thinking about social and justice, racial organizations, he said, hey, right from day one, I'm going to support these organizations. So Verizon put its money behind this. Are you sure you're going to do this? Yes, $10 million. And said, to the NAACP, the National Action Network, the Leadership Conference for Human Rights, the Rainbow Push Coalition, National Coalition of Black Civic Participation. So real things. We've had Michael Anthony Dyson on. We've invited thought leaders from around the country to speak at a official Verizon meeting, virtual meeting, open to all company employees, discussing racial inequalities, open discussion, not a I guess a PC conversation that I would think before pre-George Floyd's passing, but a real conversation. Politics, what's happening in the country, civil unrest, and open dialogue. We have training, like how do you, so we're saying, hey, let's have these conversations. How do leaders have a conversation with people of color, employees of color? And they said, hey, how do we navigate that? That could be difficult. It could, get some unintended consequences. So we train leaders across the company on how to have that conversation. It's been a real, I'm really excited. It made me really proud. I was already proud to be working at Verizon, but I'm just ecstatic about it, and the leadership, really not just words, but actual programs in place that this will continue. And also we released our diversity report internally. And I'd been at Verizon for 3 years. I hadn't seen it. So we looked at diversity across all levels of the company. And the company, we said, we're making a commitment that we're going to improve that. But most large companies, we know you can look back and you can see that there's diversity. But we're really committed to how do we help people of color once they assimilate, once they come into the business, how do we help them excel in their career and have get promoted and lead the company in at leadership, VPs, executive vice presidents. So it's a real movement that has started at Verizon.
Yeah. Oh, that's great, Herbert. You actually hit on another question that's going to come later on. But we're going to hold that thought, and we're going to jump over to Milo, because at Con Edison, I know we had an approach that involved having courageous conversations. And Milo, can you tell us a little bit about those conversations and any additional ways that Con Edison has responded?
Yeah, so we have always strived to reflect the community we serve, and we're pretty young. I think that but as Herbert says, with George Floyd and you saw that video, it really struck right across the company. So we did a couple of things. The first thing was similar to what Herbert said. We had a company-wide message from our CEO that, we're reinforcing our commitment not to tolerate intolerance. Now, that was a message that our CEO have always been on and saying. So that was nothing new, but the passion of which he made sure he got that message across right after us seeing the shortfall from George Floyd. We also signed with 190 other CEOs to support racial justice. And then we had an ongoing discussion with the team on the race means, race in the workplace, representation, real candid open discussions, and those discussions are ongoing. And then you mentioned the employee resource group, that we provided a venue that folks could vent their frustration and how they felt with the outpouring that they saw after George Floyd. Now, I've been in the company a long time, right? And I'm a minority, and certain things. We, as minorities, we say among ourselves, we don't say to the general group. This forum, you had well represented across the races, religion, everything. And I've never participated in such raw emotion as we're seeing. If I think the general population was feeling, but this was an open, no bar, candid, open discussion that I tell you was refreshing and left me in awe to some extent. And these discussions continue. We also developed what we call a D&I playbook, because we wanted to have those courageous conversations. Those are the conversations that we don't like to have. It's hard to have. When we grew up, people always say, don't talk about race, don't talk about religion, and certainly we don't do it in the workplace. And so how do you have those discussions at work? How can you be frank and candid, knowing that folks are coming from different places? And this playbook was to help leaders have those conversations and get the most of it. I've been to conversations, I've seen folks come into the conversation with their opinion, and when they leave, completely eye-opening. Now, none of this is going to be easy, right? I'm not saying you come into the conversation, and if you're expecting an easy conversation, then you're in the wrong venue. These are tough conversations to have, but I think the playbook certainly helped us to get through some of those. Ongoing training sessions for the employees on race and representation and impact. We were doing this prior to COVID, and prior to COVID and prior to George Floyd, and we continue those training across the company. Long-term response, data-driven metrics, representation matters, transforming the culture, increasing representation, not only the lower, but right rank of and senior leadership. So those are all things that we have laid out in a structure. We have timelines for them, and certainly, as a group, we're working towards, and the corporate leadership team is fully engaged around it. The discussions are candid. We know it's something as a leadership team we have to drive through the company, and that is what we're doing.
Thank you, Milo. Melanie?
You know, similar to Herb and Milo, National Grid did all of the same actions. But I got to tell you, yes, our CEO, our global CEO, as well as our U.S. based CEO, came out with a very strong and powerful message to us as an organization around support as well as expectation for how we as colleagues not only interact and interface with one another, but what is the expectation for how we interface and connect to our customers and our communities as well. I had the privilege of, and here's where some of the power in this moment has come, is watching and being involved with our Alliance of Black Professionals, our ERG group, who took on the process and the moment to create a plan, and which was shared with the organization about what Black and Brown employees within National Grid thought were critical and important for the fabric of the organization. That plan, which included many of the items that we've been talking about today, from training to not only recruitment, because it's important to get people in the door, and often we can get folks in the door. You got to keep people in. And while people are in, they need to grow and be valued, trusted, and respected for what they bring to the table. And so a part of the plan was outlined to do and address just that. To look at things from pay and promotion to obviously where we give and support philanthropically, and from a corporate social impact perspective. And if you heard in John Bruckner's statements when he kicked off today's session, for us to make a bold pronouncement that 50% of our executive leadership team will be people of color in less than 5 years. So those bold pronouncements probably may have always been talked about behind closed doors, but we are publicly talking about that and holding ourselves accountable to that. And last but not least, leadership has to walk the talk, because it doesn't work if it doesn't. And I had that opportunity to engage in a month-long conversation with the top leaders within the organization. We engaged in a month-long discussion around race dialogue. And I got to tell you, that was probably one of the most profound moments in my career, is to sit through that and have these very raw often and painful often, but also important dialogues to move forward. So it is more than a moment. It is definitely a movement.
Thank you. Well, I think what all three companies are doing is really, really great, as far as, leveling the playing field, also giving employees a forum to express themselves. That's something that has not been done prior to this event. So you guys are reaching back and making the next generation better. So I really thank you all for that. So at this point, are there any other challenges that our companies are facing that we are overcame or working to overcome outside of the George Floyd and COVID-19 pandemic? Anything that came by surprise?
Yeah, nothing I would say that came by surprise. I think in terms of challenges, I would say the company is a microcosm of the outside world. So as we have been in COVID since March, and of course, over time, folks will drift. We call it operational drift. So we continue to message to our folks, social distancing, wearing a mask, cleaning down surfaces. One of the things we're seeing is, folks do well at work, and then when they get home or they have their socials and this as well, then they go and socialize, and so we continue to message around that. And I think that's something we will have to continue messaging around to keep folks focused, to make sure that at the end of this, when we have COVID in our rearview mirror, um, we certainly, both they and their families, are safe. I think the issue of vaccine and the logistics around it, we have to work through. Um, the issue of what does the future of the workplace looks like. Um, the issues, we, as I said, we serve the five boroughs and Westchester. We can see the economic downturn of the city. We hear the issues around it, folks leaving the city and all those rhetoric around it. So I think those are all issues that we're reckoning to be discussed as COVID in our rearview mirror.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just add to Milo's point. He talks about the drift, which is a fatigue. Trying to remind folks that, hey, I know it's been 8 or 9 months, but yes, you still have to practice social distancing. You still have to wear your face mask, wipe things down. All of these things are true. I think there's also another fatigue, and I think it's the fatigue of heavy engagement, involvement. Our teams want to do the right thing. They're glad. They recognize what's happening in the society. They're happy that they're employed and they're giving it their all every day. So one of the challenges that we're trying to overcome is getting people to take time off when they may not necessarily can take that trip overseas or to Florida or go see grandma's. Like, I still need you to unplug. I still need you to relax so you can recharge. So that's really been a challenge for the company. Challenge for me and my team, that I'm really just trying to. It's personal health. There are things beyond COVID-19 that can impact you and your family. You got to take care of yourself. I think that's a challenge for all of us to make in ourselves as well, taking care of ourselves and making sure our team is caring for themselves as well. Self-care, practice self-care.
Absolutely. Self-care it is. And one of the last things, to really try to help employees, in particular our employees who are trying to work, to Herb's point, they go all out and really trying to do exceptional work while trying to educate children at home. I've seen that has been a significant ball to help employees try to balance. And that's where we have to just continue to step up and put the right supports, continue to put the right supports around employees to help them balance all of the challenges. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. I just wanted to drill down a little bit further as far as how do you help employees at home? Like, is there like a benefits or any type of programs that they're involved with or that the company provides or services?
Oh, go ahead, Herb, please. No, you please.
Yeah, early on, I mean, when we talked about social distancing and not coming to work if you're not feeling well, we did recognize that our people are dedicated and if they're going to come to work, and if there's a financial impact, they're more likely to come to work. So we put benefits in place where if you've been in contact or you're caring for someone with a pre-existing condition, there's time off with full pay up to so many weeks. So certainly our team has taken advantage of that and using that for the good of the company. but it also has put some stress on if you had, New York City, I had half my team out, early on for a couple of months. So you had to adjust for that. And you had to let people know that, hey, we're thinking about the greater good for the company, the greater good for society, for our customers. So we're going to just absorb this financial, the impact of this, and don't feel guilty that you're staying home. So I had, an employee that, wife had COVID. They have a young child. He got COVID. She's in the hospital. He's just got mild symptoms. And I called to check in on him. He's like, hey, I'm going to be cleared to come back to work on this day. And I was like, wait, you don't need to. We have this handled. You need to take care of your family. So there are benefits out there. And I think it was important for companies to do that and to continue to remind folks that you got to care for yourself and think about your coworkers and the customers we're serving, and not coming to work if you feel ill. But we realize there's economics to this, that people have to take care of their families. So we extended benefits, a really great benefit package to our employees.
Okay.
Yes, just to add to what Herb said, some benefits that I've seen. Well, one of the things I think we haven't really got a good grasp on yet is the mental issues that's going to come up after folks have been isolated for so long, and the stresses, economic stresses, and just the mental issue given COVID, given the joy issues. And one of the things is we do have counselors on. That's a benefit we have always offered. I think it helps employees. They need that sort of support. And we do try as a team to make sure that we're checking up on each other. We provide venues that folks can, we call it all calls. So when supervisor, managers, VPs get on these calls, we have discussion that folks can, whatever is bothering them, they can talk through it. But I think talking to a professional that can help you certainly is a benefit for the folks at Con Ed, and certainly that they use. The other one I think that's of a benefit too is nutritionists, because as you know, working from home, the way you eat, all that, throw your life, your cycle off. So all that I think to let them through that we have right now.
And to Herb and Milo's points as well, in addition, one of the things to deal with mental health is also the physical strain that sitting in your chair behind these computers or behind the screens to some extent that we do all day. We offer stretch and flex classes throughout the day. So employees can take that 20, 30 minute break to work out with some of our trainers, our sports related trainers, just to stretch and flex. And I cannot underscore the immediate counseling that's required and necessary. And then the last piece for us in terms of offering an accelerated benefit was around childcare, because we knew that there were still some of our employees that had to be in the, we got to keep the lights on. You have to be out in the field. So we did and have an accelerated benefit around childcare to help support those employees in particular.
Excellent. Thank you all. So in everything that I've heard today, 2020 has been the year to adapt and be resilient. In today's workplace, please describe some qualities that are critical for business leaders to find their way through into our next new normal. I will start with Milo.
Yeah. So I this time said that I think company is just a microcosm of the wider society. Also, you can see the different generations in the workplace. you can see if you use George Floyd response as an example, you see young people out there of all colors and races, right, marching and protesting. I think the workforce in a short time will be mostly millennials, and of course they're looking to go to a company that they think are good social citizens and that's aligned with the values that they have. So I think leaders in this time and going forward has to be sensitive around that. They have to be sensitive about representation. They have to be ready. So I think some of our senior leaders got onto the employee resource group that I talked about earlier, and they heard some of the same emotions and the rawness that folks are saying. And I think leaders have to be able to listen. They have to provide a place for candid discussion. They certainly have to look at representation, and of course, knowing that if you have a diverse team, all everything that we have looked at says that you end up with a better product. Now, again, we are just a microcosm of the wider society. So as we engage regulators, engage stakeholders, as we talk about green energy, how it's deployed in minorities, communities. What does your rank and file looks like? What does your leadership level looks like? All that I think leaders have to be really engaged around. It takes hard work. I would say if you talk to leaders 10 years, 20 years from now, ago, right, they would say, yes, we are making progress. The general population, the ones that are looking up, might say you're not making as much progress. And so all this, as it comes to the bottom line, social citizens, social justice, representation, I think leaders have to be fully engaged around it.
Thank you. Melanie?
As that, if the right representation, if you have a diverse team, every study says that it doesn't detract from your bottom line, it improves your bottom line.
Thank you, Milo. Melanie?
I think one of the core things that we are seeing as an organization, especially from a leadership perspective, not only dealing in hopefully a post-COVID world eventually, but also dealing with issues around social justice and really trying to figure out how you move and grow an organization, or to keep an organization engaged. We now understand that cultural competence in leaders is just as important as business, financial, and strategic acumen. Because cultural competence, with those leaders that possess strong cultural competence and high levels of emotional intelligence, will be able to really drive organizations through resiliency, recovery, and hopefully growth. Cultural competence is absolutely core. And that's the number one skill now for us.
Herbert, how about you?
Yeah, I think the points Milo and Melanie laid out are spot on, and that social piece, that social intelligence, that EQ, all of that is really important. And I think there's some basic things that everybody focuses on. We know why we're at work. We know that in spite of the pandemic, social justice, civil unrest, we know that We need to have good systems in place and tools so we can get the work done. We know business results matter. So you still, foundational, you still have business results that you need to do. But I believe the most important leadership qualities, and I think this has always been true, and I think it's just clear and evidence to more that it's truer now than ever in the past, is that the skills a leader needs is really around people. How do we develop? How do we lead our team? How do we interact with our people? How do we build strong relationships? Not just with the most senior folks in the organization, but every team member has value regardless of their title or their role or level of responsibility in the organization. So leaders need to be more empathetic, empowering. We need to care about our team beyond their contribution, beyond their business contribution. They are people, they bring in whole selves to work, or they invite us into their homes, doing virtual meetings, doing virtual work. And this is not just it's not just a feel-good thing, right? It's also the right thing to do, is that we need to be connected better as people. And I think not being connected is evidence of what happens in society, what happens in the world. George Floyd, all of the civil unrest, these underlying things where we're just not in relationship with one another, and we need to make time for that. So it's also good business practice. And when you're having those relationships with your team, instead of solely focusing on results, put more of our energy to our team members. You're going to harness the power of discretionary effort and fully engage people. The results will take care of themselves, the goals that you have set. But if you neglect that, you're not going to achieve those goals. And it's not just about achieving those goals. As I said, I believe it's the right thing to do as human beings, that we need to be in better relationship, and it requires work. Milo talked about listening. We really need to active listen, truly understand where people's viewpoints that are different from ours. And we'll find that if we listen long enough, there's a lot of common ground, and we could use that common ground to build strong and productive relationships that helps one another, our businesses, and society as a whole.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Just want to add a little to what Herb said, because and Herb talked about the people skills. Now, past generations, or maybe even present generations, look at it as the soft skills, as some folks say, and put value on the technical or marketing skills that affect the bottom line. But as he said, these are core leadership going forward. As it has to be a baseline, that how you grow your people, mentor, all that. Because if you don't have that, and we have seen some of the leaders that we have glorified in the past, in terms of the technical competence, and certainly as he has driven a whole generation, some of the things that they did. But I think the people part of it has to be core to any leaders going forward.
Excellent. Thank you. So I saw a quote the other day by Sun Tzu, and it says, in the midst of chaos, there's also opportunity. I think new beginnings are a chance to make things right and make things better. There's a chance to take a step back and approach our professions with a new perspective. So I'm looking at 2020 as a way to improve our systems, processes, and our teams. So while we're in the midst of a pandemic, how are we preparing for a post-COVID-19 workplace?
I think that's a great quote, and trying not to spin anything. I ignore the challenges of 2020. Certainly, there are challenges, and they're going to continue into 2021. I can't even believe that it's December already. The year has gone by, but I think in challenge we can thrive. When a child cries, and no one likes to hear a child cry, but their lungs are growing. So something negative or appearance of something negative happening, there's also something positive that comes out of it. The lungs must grow for the child to grow. So they're crying. We want to alleviate that, but there's benefit to that. So I think we can use this as an opportunity to thrive. My team, Verizon, we're thriving through these times. And I think part of it is some of the things we talked about earlier, the things that we realize we can move a lot faster than anyone ever thought with cooperation and a clear message and sense of urgency. And I think the challenge for us is going to be, how do we move that quickly when we've researched, done the proper research, our decisions are informed by data, and maybe it's not something that's really urgent in front of you, like a pandemic that you need to address today. So I think if we can get folks to move in that area when there's not this urgent piece in front of us, we could be prepared for whatever is going to come in the future. So I think this is really an opportunity for us to thrive. And I feel like there's no, in my head, it's just practical. It's like, you're going to thrive or what? What is the alternative to not thriving? So I think there's a lot of lessons that we've learned through this, all the communication. I think, even though it's virtual, and there's some pros and cons to virtual, I feel that I'm more connected to my team. Some team members I haven't seen in 8 months. I feel a greater connection because I found myself listening more, because you have no choice, because this virtual setup, you have to pay attention, valuing their opinion, and not trying to solve everything on your own. So I think if we can harness that energy of engagement and discretionary effort, we can thrive, not just as a company, not just as individuals, but actually as a society.
Melanie, your thoughts?
There's not much more to add after Herb's comments, other than to say, I think in this, there's a quote I keep in my head, because I think it inspires me to figure out how I need to show up as a leader and what I need to do. And this is just a powerful quote for me, and it comes from the great Frederick Douglass. Without struggle, there can be no progress. So when I think about this moment that we are in, the struggle I got to tell you, the world went lopsided probably the first week in March. And we've all been teetering, going back and forth, going through a tremendous amount of struggle. But I think in essence, this moment needed to happen to have us reset who we needed to be as leaders, as organizations, as communities. And that's what I've seen this journey for us. And I gotta believe through this process of figuring out how resilient and innovative people can be, that our businesses will be stronger. And if we have strong businesses, we'll have strong communities, because we are a direct representation of our communities. So hold tight to that statement. Without struggle, there can be no progress. And so I think we're poised and ready.
Thank you, Melanie. Milo?
Yeah, I think when you look on the utility industry, we're looking at gas, steam, that and as we march towards green, hasn't even slowed down a bit in the midst of COVID, right? We're still having the same discussions, the long-term plans on how we get there is still going on. However, we can see based on COVID, whether it's in society or the business, that there are lessons to be learned. For one example, what will the new workplace look like? As I said, as I started out, if you had asked me, could engineering work from home and be effective and still support the field organization? Prior to March, I would probably say no. You could probably pull out part of the team, and yes, some could work from home, but the entire team work from home, I would have said no way. The feedback from the field while we're going through all this is saying, listen, the team has missed step. When we're still getting our work packages, we're still doing relay upgrades, all that good stuff. So we really have to take a second look at what the workplace is going to look like, workplace of the future. We have a team at Con Ed looking at it. Um, the only thing I tell folks is we're still in the middle of the firefight, right? Um, and so you still have to do I still think you can make a full assessment while you're in the firefight, and make drastic changes for the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. But the lessons that we have learned, and there are many, one of the things I say to my team, you know, future generation is going to critique us on how we did this. But with that said, we certainly can take these lessons learned, make it better for us and make for society as a sure that is there. For instance, we can look how we deploy green energy in minority communities. We saw how COVID, well, folks are saying that COVID showed up the disparities among minority communities. If you talk to minority communities, they'll say, listen, it's always been there. We've been telling you that there is, but certainly now it's visible. And so those lessons, whether it's COVID, whether it's the how you deploy green energy in minority communities, how do you make sure that they're fully engaged around it, all those lessons we can learn from this, whether it's healthcare in minority communities at one end of the spectrum, and the other end of the is how like and in community are all issues that I think society is looking on now. And there, as we say, right, there's a silver lining to everything. Maybe this is it.
All right. Thank you all. So that concludes all the questions for our panel discussion. At this time, I would like to invite the audience, if they have questions, to please put them in the chat, and we'll begin asking our panelists the questions. All right, so I see one right now. It says, for the telecom utilities, how significant do you anticipate these balances will be at the peak of this crisis?
I think we've all dealt with uncollectibles, bad debt, right? And so there's a financial model for that, and it's it gets written off, and so there's some challenges. I mean, Verizon, we decided not to cancel accounts, and we extended for a great period of time. But at some point, those debts will be written off. And now the impact, which really is important, is how to impact your company. I think you can think about it short term as like, oh, this is horrible, I cannot do anything. But it's how we are managing our assets. So from a capital spend perspective, what return on assets are we getting? Verizon, I think we're in the top 5 in the world in capital spend at $18.5 billion. We have, projects that are ongoing that are necessary that we will continue to fund. But we just have to make sure that when we spend those dollars, we're spending with the mindset on today and the future that we will have a return on investment that can offset losses in other areas. From an OpEx perspective, there's a lot of pressure, as on your operating budget, but there's efficiencies. I think the things we'd say, hey, how efficient are you? I think everybody said, hey, we're really efficient. But I think when you start looking at your balance sheet and really paying attention to the uncollectibles, is that you can offset that because I think there's plenty of room for improvement on how we manage our capital budget and how we manage our OpEx expense. And then I think you don't have so much to worry about the impact of those uncollectibles, because they're going to exist for all of us.
Okay, Herbert, thank you. Another question I see was related to the last question with the post-pandemic world. How will vaccines play a role, if any, in the return back to work? I mean, we may not know this, but is there any thoughts around it at the moment?
to return
What
to
was the
work.
Boy, I
question,
didn't hear
Gloria?
the last part. I didn't hear the last part of the question.
Sorry, let me go back. So the last question was around our final question in the panel discussion related to the post-pandemic world and if vaccinations will play a role in the return to work.
Mm.
And we may not know
Yeah,
that.
yeah, I'm sure, and that's a plan that from a federal level, from a state level, is still rolled out. Every indication is that vaccine plays a role. Um, Again, how it's deployed, who gets it first, who gets it second. I still think as a city, as a community, we have to still think about folks think they are taking vaccine. And of course you can't force people to do it, but the messaging has to be around it that all indication is that the vaccine works. We have to get to a herd population where a lot of folks are vaccinated. We have to figure out how that's going to be done. But in the interim, we got a message: mask works. The science works, and as such, in the interim, we have to make sure we wear our masks. We got to make sure we're wiping down, um, um, work areas. We have to make sure that we're social distancing where we are, and when we and socially, whether with our friends or otherwise, we cannot congregate because that is a breeding ground for more COVID. So I think vaccine will definitely play a part, but in the interim, we got to by the rules. COVID.
It's a very interesting question. And Milo, I think that's some people have that same school of thought that you can't force it, but there are some employers, some small companies that are the way I read the question, it says some small companies are saying that employees cannot come to work without a vaccination. So there's going to be some ongoing legal debate around this. I don't know that large corporations would make that same statement, but I think the question is still out on that. Are we just going to rely on individuals to make the right choices? And we know that, although face covering does work, um, vaccination would really help us in the long run. So it's I think it's yet to be determined whether companies are going to force people or make it a requirement. You can't force them, as Milo is correct. You can't force anyone to do that, but you can make it a condition of employment. And that's a battle. So I've been just reading some articles. You can search. There's some things in the Wall Street Journal. There's some articles and different legal opinions about can you actually make that a vaccination a condition of appointment, of employment. And I don't know the answer, but I think there's going to be a lot of legal experts that are going to weigh into this over time.
Thank you. Melanie, anything additional?
No, I think we're still very much in uncharted waters, and so from issues around legality to morality are going to be the two things that we're going to struggle through in with vaccinations and in a COVID recovery environment.
All right, thank you. That's all the questions that we have in the chat. I know we have all been enriched by our discussion today and the insights that have been provided by our panelists. And although we are in trying times, we believe in the change as we continue to approach the new normal. We need to be relentless in our approach to tackling the challenges that impact our way of life. Before we go, panelists, if there's one thing you want our audience to take away from today's session, what would it be?
One thing, you matter. The work that you do, regardless of the role, the title, whether you're at in your career, whether, most of us always think we should be in a different place than we are. You're probably exactly where you need to be. So embrace that. Although 2020 has been challenging, there are good things that are happening. You're here. You're viable. You can contribute to your community. You can contribute to helping your coworkers. So the one thing is, you matter, and you can thrive in this time.
Yeah, I'll follow up on the same vein that Herb said. And it's something that we say at Con Ed, and we continue to push. Everyone matters, right? I think if you poll each person, they want to come to a place where they feel respected, where they think the company values them, where they think they're making a difference to society, and that they feel valued, as I said. And I think that's the workplace that's trying to be. And but that's the workplace we're striving to be. And certainly we can see when you talk about change, when we talk about our industry, the industry is changing rapidly. We're going to need folks, employees that are engaged around it. We see the social issues around it. And I'll tell you the truth, I'm excited for what the future holds. We certainly have to get through here, right? But I think we have the right people. I think we attract the right people. I think the message that our senior leadership is messaging to the company that we want Con Ed to be a place where people can come work, meet your full potential, that where you feel respected, and that intolerance is not tolerated.
Thank you, Milo. Melanie?
And I think the last thing that I'd say that my fellow colleagues have said today, stay courageous, right? Stay absolutely courageous, because in this moment, everyone wants to feel trusted, valued, and respected. And Herb, in your words, because you matter, we matter, I matter. So stay courageous, and stay well and be well. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you all for your time today. I think this has been a really great panelist discussion. There are no more questions, but I wanted to thank you. And this has been Navigating the New Normal, Con Ed, Verizon, and National Grid Edition. I'm signing off. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank
Thank
you. Have a
you.
good day.